Hello, and welcome to In Just 7 Steps, I Can Make You a Man. This is a panel I did at several conventions throughout 2019 and 2020, including Animazement, Cosplay America, GalaxyCon Raleigh, NC Comic Con Bull City, and KatsuCon. And now that I've taken it through most of my usual yearly rotation of cons, I wanted to make a version of it for my YouTube channel so that those of you who weren't at any of those cons can still have a chance to see it. My name's GC Kinsey, and I'm an artist and cosplayer who specializes in complete physical transformations. Some of the ways I do that include special effects makeup, wig styling, wig making, and all manner of drag and other gender based transformation. In terms of my own gender, I'm non binary, specifically gender fluid, but I was assigned female at birth and I'm working with some very curvy anatomy as a result of that. So I've learned how to adapt the body and the features that I have to the male characters I cosplay, and I tend to do that a lot. So now I want to share some of the things that I've learned about masculine presentation with all of you through this panel. This is intended for those of you who want to cosplay convincingly as male characters, even if you're not a man yourself. But if you are, feel free to stick around because there might be some useful information for you too if you want to look even more masculine. A little disclaimer, although this panel is all about practical tips for masculine presentation, I want to make it very clear that this is not about here's what you have to do in order to quote unquote pass as a man. I have a lot of thoughts about passing culture that you can find on my Instagram, but basically it boils down to the idea that all trans, non-binary, and otherwise gender variant folks deserve equal respect whether they pass as their true genders or not. So with all of that out of the way, let's dive on into this panel. My process for looking masculine can be broken down into the following 7 steps. Step 1, posture. Step 2, movement. Step 3, body shaping. Step 4, chest compression. Step 5, face contouring. Step 6, facial hair. And finally, step 7, costume. So let's go ahead and look at each of these in more detail, starting with posture. When it comes to posture, one of the most important concepts to understand is center of gravity. Center of gravity is the point on your body at which your weight is evenly distributed and balanced. It's the thing artists and animators pay attention to when they are drawing characters to keep them from looking like they're tipping over. If you are assigned male at birth or AMAB, your center of gravity is in your torso. And if you're assigned female at birth or AFAB, your center of gravity is a little bit lower in your hips. So the key to being perceived as male by those around you is remembering where your center of gravity is supposed to be. So even if your own center of gravity is in your hips like mine is, practice sitting and standing in ways that make it look like your center of gravity is actually in your torso instead. And here are a few tips for that. 1, stand tall, especially if you're short. Even though, of course, men come in all different heights, there is a correlation in most people's minds of height and masculinity. So stand tall, don't slouch, and make every inch of height you've got work for you. Keep your back straight but not too stiff. You want it to look natural. Keep your shoulders back so they look as wide as possible. Don't let them slump or pull them forward or inward. Puff your chest out, not so far that your spine is curved because then it's going to look like you're popping your chest and your booty, which is going to look feminine to most people. Just keep your chest out nice and straight, again, trying to give a broad look to your upper body. Keep your hips pulled in and centered under your chest as much as possible. Don't pop them out to one side because that tends to look very feminine to others. Keep your feet approximately shoulder width apart. Having your feet together can emphasize the curvature of your hips, and it also tends to make your posture look smaller and kind of like it's taking up less space, which is again associated with femininity. And finally, when you sit, keep your legs apart. Don't man spread like a douchebag, but don't sit with your knees together or your legs crossed. So now that we've got the basics of posture down, let's go on to step 2, which is movement. The way you move can make a huge difference in how masculine or feminine people perceive you. So let's take a look at a masculine walk versus a feminine walk and note the differences. And I used runway models here as my examples because the way they walk really exaggerates those differences and makes them very clear and easy to see. When we look at our male model on the left, we can see that a masculine walk is led from the chest and shoulders. There can often be a bit of a swagger in the upper body. But overall, the movement has less sway to it. It's not exactly stiff, but it's also not very fluid. And there's also a little bit of space between the model's feet. By contrast, when we look over at our model on the right, we can see that a feminine walk is led from the hips instead of the upper body. And that walk has a ton of sway, especially from side to side. There's a lot of fluid motion. And instead of having space between the feet, the model is putting one foot in front of the other. So, when it comes to moving in a masculine way, it's important to minimize these feminine aspects of your walk and maximize the masculine aspects. So here are a few tips for moving in a masculine way. Everything that we learned in step 1 about posture is a great foundation. So you're really just taking all of that and putting it into motion. That means that you're going to keep that center of gravity in mind and you're going to be walking like your center of gravity is in your torso. And I think it's really important to point out, don't be afraid to exaggerate or overcompensate. And I say that because it's really easy to undercompensate and feel like you're walking in a very masculine way when really you still look like you're walking in a pretty feminine way. So look in the mirror, film yourself, look at how you're actually walking and see how you can overcompensate and truly look masculine. And even if the way you're feeling, the way you're moving feels a little bit ridiculous at first, and speaking from firsthand experience, it almost definitely will. What matters is how it looks, not so much how it feels. I have found that masculine movement is a lot more challenging to really get right than masculine posture. So practice, practice, practice. I power walk a lot for exercise, and I use that as an opportunity to practice my masculine walk. I'm pretty sure I have scared several of my neighbors a few times by murder walking down the street like Bucky Barnes. But the point is, the more you practice, the better you're going to get, and the more natural it will start to feel over time. So now that we've covered posture and movement, let's go to step 3, which is body shaping. And when it comes to having a masculine body shape, there's one really big important thing to remember, which can be summed up in the words of a certain Shakira song: hips don't lie. Even if you are doing everything you can with your posture and your movement to make it look like your center of gravity is in your torso, the proportions of your hips might still prevent people from seeing you as a man. This is especially true if, like me, you are curvy. But don't worry, there are some things you can do about it. Look for shapewear or athletic wear that is designed to compress the lower body, including the upper thigh, lower belly, and hip area. This is going to pull everything in and help it lie smooth, which can really help minimize it a little bit. You want to make sure that you look for shapewear that stops at or below the waist, as shown here. A lot of shapewear goes all the way up under the bust line, but what that's going to do is pull in your waist too, which can further emphasize that curve from your waist to your hips. So you want to avoid those and look for ones that only compress or shape the waist down. If you really want a lot more careful control over that hip to waist ratio, one thing you might want to consider is cinching. A cincher is a type of shapewear that uses hooks and eyes to pull in and smooth the lines of the body. If you use one of these, you want to put the hooks at your lower belly and hip area on the tightest setting you can. So that's going to be on this image where I have put a circle and marked it with the word tight. And what you'll want to do with the rest of the hooks from that waist area up, where I've marked it as loose, is put those on the loosest setting possible. And what that's going to do is cinch in your hips without also cinching in your waist. So that's going to help you avoid that hip to waist curve and give you straighter lines along your torso. And it does really make a difference in measurements because of the way that it redistributes your tissue. So with a cincher on, my hip measurement is actually 1.5 inches smaller than it is without one. There are some cinchers that have a zip-up outer layer over the hooks and eyes for added smoothness. So that's the kind that I use. And those can be really good if you're wearing a very tight or fitted costume and you don't want the hooks and eyes to show through the fabric. Even with shapewear or cinching, there's nothing you can do to make your actual pelvic bones smaller. So, in that case, you pad out the upper body for balance. And this typically involves making your shoulders appear bigger, broader, and more muscular. So that's what I've outlined here in red on this image, showing where you would pad out your arms and shoulders. And also, optionally, if your waist still dips in a lot, even with shapewear or a cincher on, you can pad out the waistline as well to give your torso a straighter line from chest to hip. Here are a few materials that you can use for upper body padding. And I find that these kinds of materials work best if they are built into some kind of a tight garment like a swim shirt, gymnastics wear, Under Armour, something that's going to be worn underneath your costume. If you put padding like this into the costume itself, it actually is more likely to come across to others as feminine because it looks like that 80s businesswoman shoulder pad look. You want the padding to be closely attached to your body so the costume can move around it, just like it would move around actual muscles on your body. Upholstery foam is a really great material if you need to create custom shapes, such as padding for your waist that I mentioned in the previous slide. Shoulder pads and padded bra cups work really well for giving yourself bigger shoulders. I have taken apart some of my old push up bras that had pads in the cups and used them to make padded out shoulders for several of my costumes. If you don't have any bras lying around, you can also just buy bra cups online. There are also self-adhesive strapless silicone bras, and a lot of people call these chicken cutlets because that's exactly what they look like and feel like. And I've included some images here from a cosplayer named Yaki Yako who shared how you can use these silicone bra cups to create realistic looking muscle shapes on your arms. And I've done this for several of my characters as well. Now, these kinds of bra cups do stick to your skin on their own, hence the self-adhesive, but if you're at a con where you're probably going to be sweating a lot, it never hurts to reinforce them with a kind of higher level medical grade or theatrical grade adhesive like spirit gum, liquid latex, or Prozaid. Some other things that you can do for padding out your upper body are wearing a muscle shirt, muscle suit, or even full body prosthetic under your costume to give it a more masculine shape. And here are a few different examples. Funky Bod makes padded muscle shirts. These are kind of in the 50-ish dollar range. You can also make your own padded muscle shirts using some of the materials that I showed on the previous slide. I've actually done this with some of my old swim shirts, just sewn some silicone bra cups into the shoulder area. If you've got a bit of a bigger budget, more in the range of a few $100s, you can get full silicone prosthetic piece for a masculine upper body. The example I have here is from Rowan Iyer, and I actually have one of these. Be warned, if you look up their website, it is extremely not safe for work and meant for an 18 plus audience, so just keep that in mind. If you have an even bigger budget in the thousands, Flex makes full muscle suits that you can buy. And then also some cosplayers, such as Jex, whose work I've shown here, have also made their own custom foam latex muscle suits. So if you have prosthetics or muscle making skills, this might be something that you would consider. If you don't, there are people who would do this kind of suit by commission. Again, this would require a big budget, probably similar to what you would get from one of these suits from Flex or higher, depending on what you're paying for and how customized it is. I just want to note, especially because of the budget involved in a lot of these projects, that these kinds of things are more useful if you are cosplaying a really big, muscly superhero character. Somebody like All Might, Thor, the Hulk, Bane, these really beefy characters. And something like these, silicone prosthetics like the one from Roy and I are great if you want to achieve a very hyper realistic, bare chested masculine look. But none of these kinds of items are required to look masculine at all. These are sort of the next level. and I just wanted to mention them. But because of the budget involved, I wanted to point out this is not something that you have to do by any means to look masculine. So now that we have talked about some different ways to use body shaping to balance out the hips, let's move on to the next step, which is chest compression. Now, a lot of people have some really unrealistic expectations about chest compression, and that's something I want to clear up right away. Everybody has breast tissue. Regardless of your sex or your gender, you're going to have tissue on your chest. Being completely flat is impossible. So it's important to remember that it's not about flatness, it's about shape. The goal isn't to make your chest completely flat, it's to position the breast tissue so that people perceive it as having a masculine shape like pecs. When it comes to chest compression, I want to start with what not to do. And that's because a lot of people who are new to things like chest compression and chest binding tend to make these mistakes and put their health at risk. And so I want to make sure to help everybody avoid that. Ace bandages are super unsafe because they are designed to tighten more and more as the day goes by. And that can really impede your breathing, especially in an environment like a con where you're already going to be hot and sweaty and expending a lot of energy. And because of the way they tighten, they can even break ribs, so really don't risk it. Duct tape is also very dangerous because it doesn't let your skin breathe. And if you have wrapped it tightly all the way around your rib cage, it doesn't let you breathe either. This is a material that does not have any breathability or flexibility like fabric, so again, don't risk it. So, what should you do instead? These are some safer methods of binding, and I say safer because any type of chest compression always carries some risk because your chest is where your heart and your lungs are. So make sure you follow any safety guidelines that come with whatever product you buy about things like how long you should wear it, how to wear it properly, what kinds of activities it's safe to do in it, etc. The first method I want to talk about is binders. And binders are garments that are specially designed for trans men or trans masculine folks to compress their chests. But of course, anyone of any gender can use them. And they are typically made of a compression stretch fabric, similar to kind of what racing swimsuits or leotards are made of. And they have a stiff panel built into the chest area that helps shape the breast tissue like pecs. Unfortunately, binders aren't something that you can easily just go into a store and buy. For the most part, this is something that is only available online. So look for reputable companies, read lots of reviews, and do your research before you decide what brand to go with. The brand I wear is called GC2B, and they are excellent, but there are also lots of other companies that make great binders as well. So just look up all the different options and order whatever you think is going to be best for you. The other thing that's really important when you order a binder is to measure correctly according to the guidelines that the manufacturer gives you. And that's just because since you can't try it on first, having that correct measurement is really going to help ensure you get the best fit. And a lot of companies are really good about working with you if you don't get a good fit on your first try. They'll help you try to figure out how to get the right size and the right fit just because they know you can't try it on. As far as safety information, again, this is going to vary from product to product, so read the guidelines that come with whatever you buy. But in general, most binders are not recommended for longer than 8 to 10 hours of continuous wear or for exercising in, unless it's a specially made exercise binder or maybe a larger size than your usual one. And it can be really easy to forget about that during a long day at a con. So, if at any point your binder starts to hurt or feel uncomfortable, or especially if it's making it difficult to breathe or making you feel dizzy, take it off immediately. It is always better to be safe than sorry. If you try using a binder and you find that that level of compression just isn't comfortable for you for whatever reason, a compression sports bra can be a really good alternative. Unlike binders, compression sports bras are designed to compress the chest while exercising, so it is going to be easier to breathe in them. And that can be especially useful if you are compressing on a very long, hot day or if you are going to be doing a lot of physical activity in your costume. Unlike binders, compression sports bras are readily available at most stores. You can find them at Walmart, Target, places like that, as well as sporting goods stores. So that gives you the chance to try them on and get the right fit without having to go through the whole online process. You'll want to look for one that says compression on the label and that does not have any kind of built-in bra cups. That's just going to kind of add feminine shaping to your chest if there are cups built in. And a lot of these offer different levels of compression, so you want to look for a label like low, medium, or high and see what works best for you. And they're all, of course, different brands are cut in different ways. So pay attention to the fit and how it shapes your chest. And also know going in that they're not going to be quite as good as binders at giving your chest that very masculine peck-like shape, but they can still do a pretty decent job, especially depending on what kind of layering you have of your costume over it. And again, getting into safety information, this time for compression sports bras. Some people will double up compression sports bras on top of each other if they feel like one isn't compressing enough by itself. But that level of extra compression is not recommended and can be very unsafe. So, again, don't risk it. Wear your compression garment as it's meant to be worn, and that goes not only for these sports bras, of course, but also for binders. Don't wear two binders on top of each other. Don't wear a binder and a compression sports bra on top of each other. Just wear them as they're meant to be worn and don't take any risks with your health. I want to talk about another binding method, which is open chest binding. And this is for when you want to wear an open shirt and show off the middle of your chest and torso area. And open chest binding is achieved by pulling the breast tissue over to the sides and taping it down underneath your armpits. This binding method tends to be most effective on smaller chest sizes because if you have a larger chest, there's more tissue to pull to the sides and not as much room for it to go. So, that is one kind of unfortunate thing. If you do have a large chest, this may not work for you, but you may want to give it a try anyway and just see because, again, like I mentioned up front, it really is about the shape. So, just experiment with it and see if you can get the shape you're looking for with open chest binding. If you do use this method, make sure that you use a skin-safe tape, such as trans tape, which is a brand of tape that was made for this exact purpose. There's also medical grade tapes and sports tapes, such as kinesiology tape, that are going to be safe for your skin. And as I mentioned previously, do not use duct tape. It's terrible for your skin. And read any of the guidelines on whatever brand of skin safe tape that you do use to find out how to apply it and remove it safely, how long you are supposed to leave it on before you need to take it off, all of that kind of stuff. It's also highly recommended that you cover your nipples with something to protect them from the tape, so maybe pasties or even just a piece of cloth or toilet paper first. Now, if you're wondering, is it okay to wrap a skin-safe tape all the way around the chest to bind? The answer to that is still no, don't risk it. Wrapping any kind of tape all the way around your rib cage can put too much pressure on your ribs, restrict your breathing, and cause dizziness and is generally not safe. So the only time that you should be using skin-safe tape is for open chest binding, not for wrapping all the way around. We've pretty much covered the whole body now, so let's move on to the face. This next step is all about face contouring, and this is one of my favorite ones just because I love makeup so much. People tend to perceive certain facial features as more masculine and other facial features as more feminine. So, for masculine facial features, that's going to be things like square shapes to the face and jawline, sharper angles, heavier brows, smaller and more deep set eyes, and less space between the eyes and the eyebrows. And for feminine features, that's going to be more rounded shapes to the face and jawline, softer angles, lighter and more arched brows, bigger eyes, and more space between the eyes and the eyebrows. And contouring with makeup is a really great way to help you change any facial features that people might see as feminine and make them look more masculine. There are a whole lot of great tutorials and examples out there online for masculine contouring. I would recommend looking up cosplayers like Angelic Days, Allison Tabitha, Okumatsuoka, and pretty much any drag kings out there to see all kinds of excellent examples of masculine face contouring in action. But for now, here are a few basics. For your cheekbones, find the natural hollow of your cheek and contour straight across instead of sweeping upward toward the ear. This means that you probably will not be following your natural cheekbone. If you want a really chiseled look, one thing you can also do optionally is contour downward from the hollows of your cheeks toward your jaw so that the contour makes a 90-degree angle. Contour your jawline and down onto your neck. This makes your jaw look more square. And you can also contour the sides of your chin to make the chin look more square and more prominent as well. One thing that's optional is you can give yourself a cleft chin if your character calls for it. I do this for Bucky Barnes because Sebastian Stan, the actor who plays him, has a cleft chin. Another thing you can do if you want to make your chin look more prominent is contour that little dip that you have between your chin and your lower lip. You can also give yourself the appearance of a broader and more squared off forehead by contouring a little shadow straight down along each of your temples. If you swallow a couple of times, you'll see where an Adam's apple should be placed, so contour a little shadow right underneath that area. Another thing you can optionally do, especially if your character calls for it, is contour along the muscles and tendons in the neck to give them more definition. And this is something I like to do for kind of very muscly or superhero type characters. You can make your brow bone look more prominent by contouring as if it's casting a shadow down onto your eyes. And this is going to help give your eyes that more deep set look. Another thing that is optional but that a lot of cosplayers do to great effect is contouring your nose. I find that nose contouring is more useful not so much for looking like any particular gender, but for looking more like your character. This is certainly not anything that's required for a masculine look. And nose contouring is something that I find very challenging. I think a lot of makeup artists find that it takes practice, and it can also appear a little bit less natural to those who see you on the street or on the con floor. But if you are on stage for a cosplay performance, you're going to be under bright lights, or if you're doing a studio photo shoot under bright lights, you might want some nose contouring to just give your nose more definition and keep it from getting flattened out. Another thing that's optional but that I do for some of my characters is using a little bit of eyeshadow to give the appearance of dark circles under my eyes. And you can do that in, whatever shade suits your skin tone, but tends to be kind of neutrals like grays, blues, purples, browns. And this can make it look less like you're wearing makeup. It sort of undoes the appearance of foundation or concealer under the eyes that's typically associated with feminine makeup. So if you've put down a layer of foundation on your face and then you're contouring over that, and you don't want it to look like you're wearing makeup, then putting these dark circles under your eyes can kind of help offset that. And again, I don't do this for all of my male characters, but I do it if the character needs to look kind of tired or have sort of a hollowed out look to their eyes. So that covers face contouring. Now let's move on to our next step, which is one of my absolute favorites, facial hair, starting with eyebrows. Now, as I mentioned in that last step, eyebrows tend to be perceived as more masculine when they are thicker and kind of more straight across rather than arched, and when there's less space between the eyebrow and the eye. So, some ways that you can make your eyebrows look more masculine include drawing thicker, straighter brows over your own eyebrows with eyeliner or eyebrow pencil. And you're going to want to do this in small, thin strokes to kind of mimic the appearance of hairs and then set it with powder. You can also use mascara to thicken, darken, and reshape your brows. You can wear prosthetic eyebrows. I do want to caution you about how you adhere and remove them. If you use something like spirit gum as an adhesive, I know spirit gum comes with its own remover. If you're using something like liquid latex or Prozaid, there's a makeup remover called Unveil that I found works really well. Something like baby oil would also help. It just helps you roll the adhesive away from the skin and from the eyebrow hairs without doing damage. Whatever kind of remover you use, just be patient and take your prosthetic eyebrows off slowly, or you will end up with an unintentional entire eyebrow wax. I also want to make a note about anime characters specifically here because that's a popular choice for a lot of cosplayers, myself included. And when it comes to anime characters specifically, it can be really difficult to get a good masculine looking eyebrow because the eyebrows are often drawn as these really thin lines. And that's where you get to kind of interpret the design and decide whether you want to go with a more realistic eyebrow, you're kind of interpreting the character as more of a real person, or if you want to imitate the exact way that eyebrow was drawn in the anime. If your face contour is strong enough, then you can still look really masculine even with a very thin brow, as long as you watch your angles and make sure that the shape of that brow is more straight and less arched and that it's close to your eye. And you can see this in this example that I have here. This is featuring, again, a cosplayer I mentioned previously, Oku Matsuoka. And you can see here in this picture that even with these thin blonde anime brows, that the cosplayer still looks very masculine because of the angle and the shape of those brows. I want to talk about another form of facial hair, and this one's going to be optional, but it's worth going into a lot of detail on, and that is beards and mustaches. Of course, some men have these and others don't. They're clean shaven, so this is not required to look masculine by any means, which is good because not all male characters have a beard or a mustache. So this isn't something that you're going to have to rely on to look masculine. However, if your character does have a beard or mustache, this is a practically guaranteed way for people to see you as unquestionably male, so they can be really, really helpful. If you want to do a very short beard or stubble look, fiber mascara is a really great way to achieve that. And there are some awesome tutorials for this online. The one I've highlighted here is by someone named Sheerlock Combs. And basically, the approach for this is that you prime the peach fuzz growing on your face with hairspray, you brush the fiber mascara onto the hairs, and fiber mascara is designed to darken and lengthen lashes, so it's going to do the same thing to your peach fuzz. It's going to give it a little bit of extra length and thickness and make it, whatever color, black, brown, whatever that you use for your mascara. And once you've done that, then you'll set everything with powder and you have got this nice short stubbly beard. If you don't grow any peach fuzz on your face, that is absolutely okay. You can just brush the fiber mascara directly onto your skin with sort of short hair-like strokes, and you can also use a spoolie to help distribute it if it comes off clumpy. Another really good way to achieve the look of stubble or a short mustache or beard is called stippling. This is where you use a stippling sponge to apply theatrical makeup in the color of your character's beard to your face. This is going to be a much faster application method than fiber mascara, but it won't look quite as realistic or as 3D with the hairs up close as the fiber mascara will. But from a distance, it's going to look just about the same. And so a lot of drag kings tend to use this method because they're going to be on stage. You won't be seeing them, right close up. And this looks really, really great from the stage. So again, look up drag king makeup tutorials to see how to do a stippled beard. I do want to give a little bit of a tip about these short beards as well at this stage, which is to remember to go down, kind of far enough on your jaw and the edge of your neck because nothing screams fake stubble like having it just suddenly stop in a very clean line right at the edge of your chin. So just keep that in mind, sort of how the pattern of beards and mustaches grow and how stubble looks, and keep that in mind when you apply your own. Another option for kind of shorter beards and mustaches that's going to have a more stylized look is drawing it on with eyeliner or eyebrow pencil. And this is just similar to what I kind of described previously for eyebrows, that you want to draw it on with these sort of short hair-like strokes. This is something that it can be hard to make it look natural, especially from close up. So if you want to mimic something very stylized like a drawing or a video game character, anime character, painting, something like that, then this might be a really good method to help convey that. If you want to get a little bit thicker or fuller with your short beards, then one thing you can do is lay down a base color and then create some dimension with wig clippings. What you'll want to do is apply some adhesive to that base area, such as spirit gum, liquid latex, Prozaid, and then press the wig clippings onto your face. And there's a cosplayer called You Need to Strut, who's one of my favorite fellow Bucky Barnes cosplayers, who has a great tutorial on Instagram showing how to do this, so check that out. If you need a beard or mustache with more substantial thickness or length than some of these short beard methods that I've shown you, then you can do a couple of different things. One is you can apply crepe wool to your face, which is a very common technique in a lot of theatrical and movie productions. And you do this using adhesive, and this method takes a lot of patience because it has to be applied in one small section at a time. Once you've applied all of the crepe wool to your face, then you can trim and style your beard and mustache however you like. Another option is lace front prosthetic beards and mustaches. And these are full pieces where the hair has been sewn into the same kind of lace front that you would see on a lace front wig, and you just apply that to your face using an adhesive. These are a lot less time consuming to apply than the crepe wool method, and they are reusable, so that's an advantage. But on the kind of downside, they're going to be a lot more expensive. So that's kind of the pros and cons you have to weigh. How often are you going to be wearing that beard? Do you need to wear it more than once, and is it worth the cost to get a lace front piece? Now, I also want to issue the same warning that I did about eyebrows. That also applies when you're using adhesive on your face to put on a beard. Be careful about how you remove it. If you still want to have the option of putting mascara on your peach fuzz, don't rip out that peach fuzz when you take your beard or mustache off that you have put on with adhesive. So now we are coming up on our final step, and that is putting it all together with your costume. All of the tips I've given so far have just sort of been about achieving generic masculinity, but when you put on that costume, that's when you truly become the man you want to be. And there is a big variety of ways that you can express masculinity with your costume. And you can kind of see that, I think, in all these different examples of male characters that I've cosplayed. So, all of these that you see on this slide are all me. This stage here is where you get to bend all the rules you've learned and adapt them to your specific character. A few things that can help with that. One is that your costume can just be a really good way to emphasize your masculinity and emphasize those shapes that you've created underneath with whatever body shaping and chest compression methods that you've chosen. One really important thing to keep in mind is the fit of your costume. You want it to fit properly. You don't want it to be too loose or too tight. It can be really tempting to go extremely loose fitting to hide curves, but all that actually does is give you just a sort of blob like or boxy shape instead of a masculine one. And you can kind of see this in the picture here where you've got, on the left, the shirt that is not fitted at all, and then on the right, you've got one that's more fitted where you can actually see sort of the definition of the chest and shoulders. So, what actually works better than just hiding curves with a loose fit is a costume that fits not too tight, not too loose, but just right. If you are buying all or part of your costume, that means that you might need to alter those pieces or go get them tailored for a proper fit. If you are making everything yourself from scratch, then that's really great because you can ensure proper fit along the way. But there's sort of no right or wrong way to do it. It's just a matter of, whatever you've got, make sure that you take whatever steps you can to get it to fit correctly. And also think about how certain types of clothing can help to minimize curves and maximize the more masculine shapes that you've achieved. So things like jackets, vests, button-down shirts are all things that can really help, further hide your curves and really help give you that masculine shape. And layering clothes on top of each other is really great for this as well. So if you're wearing a costume that happens to involve any of those kinds of pieces or any layering, definitely use that to your advantage. And if your costume doesn't, so for example, let's say you're cosplaying Spider-Man and you're basically just wearing a skin-tight bodysuit, then that's where you'll really want to make sure that whatever you've got underneath your costume, as far as, your body shaping, your padding, your chest compression, all of that stuff, is going to work well enough on its own without relying on the shapes of your clothing to enhance it. In addition to the costume itself, there are some other aspects of your character that might help influence how you choose to convey masculinity. One example is with movement. So, now that you understand the basics of walking like a man and walking with that center of gravity looking like it's in your torso, then you can start to learn to walk like the specific man you're cosplaying. Pay attention to how your character moves and practice imitating that movement yourself. I tend to walk very differently as Beetlejuice than I do as Bucky Barnes or as Hades, even though I'm still moving in a masculine way for all three of those characters. Something else that might factor into the way you convey masculinity is age. And that's going to be both your own age and the age of your character. Age makeup is something that can help a character look more gritty and rugged, which is often perceived as more masculine. Whereas youthful makeup tends to look a little bit softer and that can be perceived as more feminine. So if you are cosplaying a young man, be really careful about your contouring. Another challenge you might face is, what if you're cosplaying an androgynous man, or what if you're cosplaying a man in drag? And both of those are types of cosplays that I do quite often. For example, here you can see my Victor from Yuri on Ice, who's very androgynous. I also do a lot of drag characters, including Frankenfurter, as an example. And the question that I always ask myself with these types of characters is, how do I convey androgyny without letting it get too far back into femininity? And the key to that, I found, is figuring out how to strike just the right balance between masculine and feminine aspects so that you are still perceived as a man first and foremost, but as a more androgynous one. And this can be a really tough thing to achieve, and it takes practice and experimentation to figure it out. That's the only thing I've really learned, is that you just have to experiment. For me personally, I have found that it works best to start with the masculine part of the look first. So, starting with masculine body shaping and face contouring, and then just layering any femininity or androgyny on top. But you might find that a different approach works better for you. So just play around with it and see what works until you're satisfied. Let's talk about photo shoots, because this is a really important aspect of cosplay for a lot of us. When you are doing a photo shoot as a male character, talk to your photographer about poses and angles that can help you come across as more masculine on camera. And part of that is remembering that the body parts closest to the camera are what will look biggest and most pronounced. So, the note I have here to myself, but to anybody else that may have this as an issue, watch your hips. That's always the biggest thing for me. And sometimes the wrong pose or the wrong camera angle can still make your body look feminine on camera, even with all of the chest compression and body shaping in the world. So, an example of that here that I wanted to show with the importance of camera angles. These are two photos of me as the Winter Soldier, and this is the exact same pose from two different angles during a shoot. And as you can see, I look a lot more masculine in the photo on top than I do in the photo on the bottom, just because the positioning of my chest and shoulders is better in that top photo in relation to the camera. My shoulders are more open. The metal arm isn't hidden behind the gun. You can actually see that shoulder. The angle of both the shot and my body looks more dynamic. The hips are cropped out. Whereas in that photo on the bottom, none of those things are true, and that tends to kind of give a more feminine appearance, even though it's the exact same pose. So, those camera angles along with your pose are really, really important. And that's why it's important to be honest with your photographer about what you're going for. If the photographer knows that you're trying to look masculine, that you're trying to conceal your hips, that you're trying to make sure your chest does not have that feminine shape, then they can help make sure that you're posing the right way with the angles that they're capturing. And I have a post on my Instagram about this. It's got a lot of posing and shooting tips for photographers working specifically with trans and non binary models, and it goes into a lot of this stuff in more detail. So definitely check that out. And with all of that, I want to wrap things up with a few parting words of wisdom, which I have paired with some inspirational lyrics from one of my favorite manly songs and a picture of my favorite manly hero. And that advice is to remember that gender and gender expression at the end of the day is whatever you want it to be. So experiment and have fun with it. You can try your best to influence how people perceive your gender, but you ultimately can't control it. And that is not a personal failing. So, no matter how you're perceived, don't get discouraged because what really matters is that the man looking back at you in the mirror is the man you want to be. If you've got any questions about anything I covered in this panel, please feel free to leave a comment on this video or send me a message. And while you're at it, go ahead and subscribe to this channel to get more videos. I make monthly cosplay music videos where I sing and play all the instruments in character. And I also plan to start adding makeup and other cosplay tutorial videos to this channel as well, so subscribe to keep up with all of that. All of the various cosplayers and other resources that I mentioned are linked in the description of this video, so make sure you check those out as well. And you can find me at any of the various social media listed here. I am only really active on Instagram these days, so that's your best bet to reach me. But if you don't have Instagram, I also check my email pretty regularly, so you can reach me there as well. And with that, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you learned something useful while you were here.